Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Oklahoma City lazily woke up to the first rays of the sun. A few silver clouds slowly floated across the pale blue sky. The local radio station Coma FM was playing the latest pop song, and the hosts were chatting about the upcoming charity festival in the central square. The air felt the coolness of early spring before the heat typical of Oklahoma had yet set in. Mark Wilson, a 35-year-old marketing executive at a large company, rose quietly at 5:30 in the morning. He was used to this regimen, half an hour of stretching and jogging, and then a shower and a short breakfast. Their house, located in one of the green areas of the northwestern part of the city, was his pride. A small but cozy courtyard, a couple of trees, a freshly cut lawn, all this created a feeling of peace and stability. Having finished jogging through the still quiet streets, Mark returned home and saw that the light was already on in the kitchen. His wife, Emily, stood at the stove, cooking scrambled eggs. She was 32 and worked in a design studio. Emily was involved in the interior design of offices and living spaces talented. Although sometimes capricious, she always strived for the perfect picture in her home and life. "Good morning, honey," Mark said quietly, entering the kitchen. "Hi," Emily looked at him over her shoulder, her brown hair casually pulled back into a bun. "How was the run?" "Great. The weather is good, not too cold. I recommend that you take up running, especially in the spring." "I'll think about it." Emily put the frying pan on the table. "Will you have some coffee?" "Let's. Thanks for the breakfast." Mark noted that his wife looks a little tense today. He did not immediately attach any importance to this, chalking it all up to ordinary morning chores. But when he sat down at the table, he saw her looking at his phone. "Are you leaving early today?" Emily asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes, we have a morning meeting. A big client. I don't want to start the day in a hurry. What time do you plan to leave for the studio?" "I think I'll make it by 9. It seems that we need to check a couple of design projects." She paused. "Is there anything new happening in your department? I heard someone new came." "Oh, yes, Sarah. She's been with us for about 2 months now. She's young, but very diligent. Today, by the way, I will discuss with her a promotion plan for a new client." "I see." Emily grinned almost imperceptibly, as if she was thinking about something. "Okay, I won't detain you." Mark didn't notice the hidden jealousy in her voice. Or perhaps he didn't want to notice. He quickly finished his breakfast, kissed his wife on the cheek, and got into the car. The drive to the office took about half an hour if there was no traffic on I-44. He usually turned on the news to keep up with politics and the weather. Today they promised no precipitation, so we can go for a walk in the evening, he thought. Emily, meanwhile, cleared the table, but instead of calmly getting ready for work, she picked up his mug of half-drunk coffee and stopped thoughtfully. Her heart sank with deep anxiety. Why does he always praise this Sarah so much? It's as if there are no other employees. In the depths of her soul, she understood that Mark always has everything in sight. He gives no reason for mistrust. However, when hidden tension accumulates in a relationship, every little thing can ring a bell. By 9 in the morning, Mark was already in his office, in a modern office center in the northern part of the city. Glass walls, lots of light, spaciousness, the place was conducive to active work. Sarah, the same new employee he mentioned, brought him a fresh set of statistics on competitors. "Good morning, boss," she smiled. "Prepared a report on market volume and target audience. Perhaps we need to double-check some things with financiers, but so far the overall situation looks good." "Great, Sarah. Look, it is important for us before the next presentation to understand exactly which segment we are focusing on. The client is aimed at the age of 30 plus, which means that you need to carefully analyze social networks, traditional media." "Understood. I'll sit down for this now." By the way, if you need help preparing your presentation for Friday, let me know. I may be late. Okay, definitely. Sarah smiled and left the office. Mark loved her efficiency and sincerity. It is not surprising that he spoke positively about her in conversations with his wife. He simply appreciated an intelligent specialist. But he had no idea how this resonated in Emily's soul. By lunchtime, when Mark emerged from the conference room after a long meeting, he noticed that there were several missed calls from Emily on his phone. He quickly called back. "Mark," she said quietly, "when will you be free? I need to ask something about the deed to the house. I think I found an old insurance contract." "Honey, I'm stuck at work right now. Let's discuss it tonight. I'll be home around 6, okay?" "Fine." She fell silent for a second. "Does anyone help you? Is this your new employee?" "Well, yes, she has a lot of tasks, but we all work as one team." "Why suddenly this question?" "No, I just asked." "Okay, I won't distract you. Bye." Mark raised an eyebrow, but chalked it up to his wife's usual curiosity. He shrugged his shoulders and moved on, not suspecting that anxiety was beginning to flare up in Emily's soul, which would soon develop into real paranoia. That evening, when Mark arrived home, Emily was sitting in the living room with her laptop on her lap. The television was on in a quiet background. The local news was showing a compilation of the day's incidents, mentioning traffic jams on the highway and a small fight outside a bar downtown. The light from the street lamps filtered through the sheer curtains, creating a soft ambience in the room. Mark wanted to hug his wife, but noticed that she barely nodded in response. He walked into the kitchen, took out a package of ready-made salad from the refrigerator, and turned his gaze to Emily. "You didn't cook dinner? Everything is fine." "Quite," she answered quietly. "I'm just tired. I had to solve a lot of issues at work." "Oh, I understand. Let's order pizza then. I don't mind something simple." "Okay, call me," Emily shrugged. While Mark dialed the number for the pizzeria, Emily continued to pretend to be engrossed in her tablet. But in fact, her thoughts were spinning around Sarah. She remembered with what smile Mark mentioned her, how he supported and praised her. And images popped up in Emily's mind. What if he's late at work for more than just business? She asked herself in a whisper. They sat down at the table, placing the ordered pizza on plates, but the conversation did not go well. Mark was deep in thought about the project, and Emily was deep in her own jealousy. And yet she decided. "Mark, tell us more about Sarah. Where did she come to you from?" "From another marketing agency. She worked in Tulsa. She has a good resume. She is married and has a daughter. In my opinion, a happy family." "Have you seen her husband?" Emily pretended to ask casually. "No, it seems never. But she mentioned a couple of times that they also have a difficult schedule. He's in the real estate industry. Maybe a realtor or a manager, I don't remember exactly." "Of course." Emily thought, is she married? Does this change anything? Not at all. People cheat even if they are married. She felt suspicions growing in her head. Mark looked at her tenderly, but Emily turned away, continuing to chew a piece of pizza almost mechanically. Later, when they went to bed, Mark quickly fell asleep, tired from a long day of work. But Emily couldn't sleep a wink. Her gaze rested on her husband's smartphone, lying on the nightstand nearby. The desire to check his correspondence and calls became almost unbearable. What if there is evidence of treason? Pounded in her mind. What if I find messages from Sarah? Finally, around 2 in the morning, she finally picked up Mark's phone. But it was password protected. Emily knew that he had been using the same code for a long time, but now, out of fear and trembling, she was unable to calmly enter the combination. My heart was pounding, adrenaline was pumping in waves. "I'm going crazy," she thought, biting her lip. "Even if I find something, I'll be afraid to admit the truth." She put the phone back, realizing that she was trapped by her own suspicions. The next day passed for Emily in a kind of painful stupor. She went to her design studio, tried to delve into the projects, but her thoughts kept returning to Mark and Sarah. After lunch, she had a window the customer she was supposed to meet with rescheduled the meeting. To clear her head, Emily decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. In the area where her studio was located, there were several cute cafes, office buildings, and a small square with a fountain. Stopping at the fountain, Emily took out her phone to check her email. Then someone accidentally bumped into her. A slight push, and she almost dropped her smartphone. "Oh, sorry," a male voice rang out. "I was too lost in thought and didn't notice you." "It's okay," Emily looked at the stranger. A tall brunette with an athletic build, wearing a suit without a tie, holding a coffee glass in his hands. "Let me buy you some new coffee," he smiled when he saw a couple of drops spill onto her sleeve. "Unless, of course, you drink coffee." I, "Yes, I drink, but I just had a meeting." "However, why not?" Emily unexpectedly agreed. They walked together to a nearby cafe. A couple of minutes later, both were sitting at a table by the window, sipping cappuccino. He introduced himself as Tom. He said that he works in real estate, helping people look for commercial premises. "By the way, I was looking at several offices here for a client." "My company cooperates with one large chain," Tom said, taking a sip. "In general, there is rapid growth in Oklahoma City now. There are a lot of new buildings." "Yes, I know. I'm a designer," Emily grinned briefly, trying to stay a little cooler than she wanted. The stranger attracted her attention with some inexplicable charm. "Nice to meet you. My name is Emily." "Very nice. Maybe you also have clients who want not just design, but a full range of services, including the purchase or rental of premises." "Maybe. Usually I get involved already at the arrangement stage. But if anything happens, now I'll know who to turn to." "Perfect. Here is my business card." Emily took the business card. "Tom Rivers, real estate manager, investment advisor." She felt his hand linger for a moment, handing over the card. A light spark passed between them. Usually she did not support flirting with strangers, but at that moment a strange mixture of resentment towards her husband and curiosity about Tom surged in her chest. "Emily, do you have a couple of minutes to talk about design? For one project, I need a professional's opinion." Now, she was surprised. "Well, actually, I might be a little late. I have some background work on the drawings." "What exactly do you want to discuss?" They started talking about the functional areas of the offices, decoration, and color schemes. Tom kept looking at her as if he saw not just a designer, but an attractive woman, and these glances awakened in her the lost excitement. When the conversation came to an end, Tom grinned. "Listen, I have a strange feeling that I've known you for longer than half an hour. Is it just me who has this impression?" "I guess so," Emily smiled at the corner of her lips. "Although, I won't say that I often drink coffee with strangers. Maybe you'd like to meet again sometime? Not necessarily for work. I just noticed that you need emotional release." "How do you know what I need?" Emily narrowed her eyes. "I can read people. I see that you have accumulated stress inside, some kind of pain. Sometimes it's better to let it out in conversation, in a company that won't judge you." "Are you sure you won't judge?" she asked ironically. "I guarantee it." Tom looked into her eyes. It was as if a current had pierced her. "Damn, Mark is somewhere with Sarah now," his mind suddenly flashed. "And I'm sitting here in a cafe with a new acquaintance who is showing obvious interest in me." The internal struggle between the duty of a faithful wife and an offended woman grew with every second. "I have free time at 7 this evening," she said, not believing that she was saying this. "Can we get a drink somewhere?" "With pleasure," Tom smiled widely. "I know a place on 23rd Street, the Blackout Bar. There is quiet music. You can talk calmly. If you want, send me your number. I will send you the coordinates." Fine. That's how it all started. Emily understood that this was madness, but the desire to take revenge on Mark, even if she had no real evidence of his infidelity and to test her own boundaries, was overwhelming. She wrote down the number, and they parted. Until the evening, fear mixed with anticipation pounded in her chest. At 7 in the evening, having justified herself to Mark by making up urgent matters in the studio, Emily drove up to the Blackout Bar. It was a loft-style place with brick walls, soft yellow lighting, and music playing not too loudly. Tom was already waiting for her at one of the tables. He looked confident and relaxed and ordered whiskey with ice. "Hi," he said, standing up to meet Emily. "Glad you came. I thought you might change your mind." "Why should I change my mind?" Emily asked, although inside she was really fighting the urge to run away. "Don't know. Maybe you'll decide that it's too strange to meet like this based on your emotions. I wanted this evening myself," she admitted, a little embarrassed. "How was your day?" "It's hectic. Clients, telephone conversations. But that's not what I'm talking about. How are you doing? I hope the tension has eased a little." "Not yet, but I think a couple of cocktails will help me." The waiter brought her a margarita. She took the first sip and felt a lukewarm calm flowing inside her. Tom talked about some funny incidents in his work, and she laughed. Gradually, the conversation turned to personal topics. "Tell me about yourself," Tom asked softly, leaning his elbows on the table. "What do you live for? What do you love?" "I am married. I work in design. I love art and nature, but lately everything has become kind of gray. Marriage problems. Let's say," Emily fixed her gaze on the glass. "I don't want to discuss this now. Sorry, I didn't mean to get in the way. I just see that you're upset. I'm married myself, but not everything is fine with me," Tom snorted briefly. "My wife is constantly busy with her work. I'm busy with mine. Our paths have diverged for a long time. It's hard," Emily nodded, "when you feel like you are not being heard." "Exactly." His voice became low and soft. "You know, sometimes you just want to forget yourself, break out of the circle of grievances and suspicions." "I want." Emily looked into his eyes. "Sometimes you just want to do something crazy." They continued drinking and talking. At some point, Tom put his hand on Emily's arm. She didn't pull it away, feeling the adrenaline still pulsing in her chest. Jealousy of Mark and anger at his possible betrayal with Sarah were mixed with an unexpectedly flared desire. The waiter brought another cocktail. Both of their eyes sparkled slightly from alcohol and hidden emotions. "Let's get out of here," Tom suddenly said, leaning so close that she could feel his breath. "I know one place, quiet and secluded." "This is crazy," she breathed, her heart pounding loudly in her temples. "Sometimes madness is the only way out." Emily didn't respond with words, but they were already getting up, having paid for their drinks. She seemed to be in a fog, following Tom to his car. The rain began to drizzle, and the city looked around with yellow lantern lights. They got into a black sedan and headed down the highway towards the western suburbs. Tom stopped at a small motel with an old-fashioned sign. Everything around breathed silence and the coolness of the night. Emily knew what she was doing, and yet an inner voice screamed inside her, "Stop before it's too late." But she began to indulge in a wave of resentment and desire. "Are you sure?" Tom asked, leaning towards her as they got out of the car. "No," she bit her lip. "But damn, I can't stop." They rented a room and barely had time to reach the door when they were overcome by a storm of passion. This was the madness she had told herself about 2 hours ago, but now it was happening in reality. All thoughts about Mark, Sarah, about my own moral boundaries were mixed into one rush. A piercing moment of silence came only after it was all over. It was raining outside the window, drumming on the roof. Emily lay clinging to Tom and felt the salty taste of tears on her lips, either from guilt or from the release of pent-up emotions. I need to pull myself together," she breathed, propping herself up on her elbow. "This is all so unexpected." "You won't regret anything," he whispered, hugging her. "Believe me, you will feel better." "I don't know." Emily closed her eyes. And then Tom's phone rang. His smartphone vibrated on his bedside table. Emily started as if waking from a dream. Tom reached for the phone, but Emily looked at the screen before he did. A name and photograph appeared on the screen, the face of a pretty woman who seemed vaguely familiar to her. Her hair stood on end when she recognized this woman. It was Sarah, the same employee of Mark. The photo in the collar badge clearly said it all. Sarah smiling, with a small office interior in the background. Damn. Emily gasped, stumbling back. This is... this is no. This is my husband's employee. What? Tom dropped the call and turned to her, frowning. Emily, what's going on? I saw her in the office. Wait, let me explain, Tom muttered, realizing that the situation was taking a completely unexpected turn. Sarah is my wife, yes. And what? And what? Emily sat down, not believing her ears. Are you the husband of Sarah, with whom my husband may be having an affair? Wait, who is your husband messing with? Tom grinned with a hint of cynicism. Sarah has complained to me more than once that I don't pay enough attention to my family. But for her to cheat on me? Seriously? They silently looked at each other for several seconds, realizing the tragicomic nature of the situation. She cheated on her husband with that person who, apparently, is the husband of Mark's suspected mistress. This is just crazy, Emily muttered. She was shaking. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh at her own actions. I don't believe this is happening. Listen, if your Mark and my Sarah are really together, then you and I are in some kind of black farce. Tom ran his hand through his hair. But you know, maybe this is beneficial for you, we got even. No, this is all. Everything is wrong, Emily shouted, jumping out of bed and rushing to her clothes. I thought I would take revenge this way, but it turned out. This is even worse. She feverishly began to pull on her clothes, trying to calm her racing pulse. Tom stood next to her and put his arm around her shoulders, but she pulled away. Don't touch me. I need to leave. Something like despair flashed in Emily's eyes. Okay, but we'll talk later, right? He asked, coming closer. Maybe we can figure it out together. Shall we sort it out? She smiled bitterly. She finished getting ready in a matter of minutes, ignoring Tom's requests to stay and discuss everything in a calm tone. My head was spinning. How long did she spend here? 40 minutes, an hour, 2. It seemed to her that an eternity had passed. When she stepped out into the drizzling rain and hit the damp air, her inner numbness only intensified. She got into the car and, not knowing where to go, turned on the ignition. Emily arrived home well after midnight. The light was still on their Mark was waiting for her, but she did not want to talk to him. She said she was tired and locked herself in the bathroom, feeling like a traitor, deceived by her wife, and a victim of her own doubts at the same time. My thoughts were confused. What if Mark and Sarah have no betrayal, and I just created a nightmare through my own fault? Or are they really together, and this is all some kind of monstrous irony of fate? Tears streamed down her cheeks as she turned off the light in the bathroom, and the last memory of Tom and his cynical phrase flashed through my head. If they deceive us, we lose nothing. But now she felt that she was losing much more than she could imagine. The next morning, Emily woke up to the sound of Mark's alarm clock. He had already taken a shower and was now preparing to go out. She heard his steps in the corridor. She herself was tormented by a terrible feeling of headache and emotional hangover. The heart was pounding, as if announcing a serious deed that could no longer be erased from the past. Emily, good morning, Mark said cautiously, looking into the room. You came late. I was worried. Everything is fine. Yes, the clients just delayed me, she lied, covering herself with a blanket up to her chin. I didn't sleep well. He pulled out headache pills from the drawer. Would you like to drink something? No, thank you. Emily tried not to look into his eyes. I will lie down a little longer. I don't have a meeting until 10. Mark sighed, realizing that his wife did not want to talk to him. In recent days, the distance between them has increased to the limit. When he left for work, he left her a note. I love you. Shall we talk in the evening? But I wasn't sure that she would react in any way. When he left, Emily climbed out of bed. The world around me seemed gray and empty. She took a shower mechanically, remembering the events of the previous night. Jealousy bubbled up somewhere in my chest. He, too, may be meeting Sarah there. But now it was even more painful for her, because she committed a real act of infidelity, even without 100% evidence of her husband's infidelity. Around noon, While Emily was already sitting in her studio, processing sketches for a new order, a message arrived on her phone. She picked up her smartphone and saw Tom's number. "We need to talk. I feel like you're in shock after yesterday." "Me too. But don't make any sudden moves until we figure it out. Call me when you can." The image of their night meeting again surfaced in her soul. Her throat tightened as she realized how far she had gone. "No, I can't talk to him now," she thought. "I don't know what I want." She locked her phone, threw it in her bag, and tried to focus on work. But it didn't work well. Even trying to drink tea and switch to music didn't help. She was tormented by a feeling of guilt mixed with resentment and anger. It's as if all the emotions are mixed into one knot that cannot be untied with one movement. And so the next few days dragged on. Emily tried to act as if nothing had happened. For Mark, she remained a wife who seemed to be going through difficulties at work and did not want to discuss personal problems. For Tom, a potential lover who is trying to understand where this crazy romance can lead them. "Maybe we can meet," Tom wrote in the messenger. "Not now. I need to think," Emily answered briefly. She tried to convince herself that this single act of betrayal could somehow be erased. But every time she saw Mark's smile and his sincere attention, something inside her broke. "If he really is unfaithful to me, at least I will take revenge," she thought. "But what if I was wrong, and he's not to blame for anything? Then who is the monster in this situation?" Mark also began to notice changes. Emily began to go to meetings more and more often, returning home with a distant look. Conversations almost disappeared, and her touches were rare and cold. Questions were swirling in his head. What happened to her? Why can't we talk normally? One evening, he tried to have a frank conversation. "Emily, I see that something is wrong between us. Maybe you can tell me what happened. Is something bothering you?" "Mark, I'm tired," she snapped, sitting in the living room. "I can't talk about my problems every time you're still busy at work." "Emily, stop it. Haven't I always tried to help you, support you? Really? And who is constantly delayed? Who's always in the office with their new favorite employee?" She blurted out, looking into his eyes. "Sarah," Mark raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What are you even making up? We just work together. She's great, and I appreciate it. But this does not mean that there is something between us." "Yes? Well then, why are you protecting her so much? Why are you so happy when you come from the office? Maybe because you spend time not only at your desk." This is already absurd. Mark's face turned pale. He felt angry because his wife reproached him without a single piece of evidence. "Think what you want, but I don't give reasons for jealousy. It's in your head." Mark stood up and left the room, slamming the door. Emily remained where she was, shaking with adrenaline. She understood that the conflict had reached a new stage. The next day, Mark was depressed. Arriving at the office, he locked himself in his office, trying to understand the family situation. Sarah noticed his sad look and tried to ask, "Mark, is everything okay? You don't look like yourself." "Thank you for your concern, Sarah. It's not easy at home. Emily seems to be accusing me of something." He fell silent, realizing that he didn't want to wash his dirty laundry in public in front of his subordinate. "Sorry, this is a family thing. I wouldn't want to drag you into it." "Understand. Just tell me if you need me to take over some of the work until things get better for you. I'm ready to help." Mark looked at her and felt a surge of gratitude. Sarah could be trusted as an employee. She never spread rumors. She worked clearly and calmly. Evening was falling softly on Oklahoma City, and through the windows of the Wilson family's two-story home, Emily could be seen walking from room to room in a kind of anxious restlessness. In appearance, she is still the same well-groomed woman of 32 years old, but over the past days her gaze has dimmed. Previously, Emily was the embodiment of discreet chic, loved stylish things, smiled at the clients of her design studio, but now this smile appeared less and less often. Mark returned home around 8 in the evening. He promised to come earlier, but got stuck in a meeting about an advertising campaign for a large client, a chain of construction supermarkets. However, when he returned, he did not make excuses. A quiet resentment towards his wife was already accumulating inside him. If it's all my fault anyway, including praising Sarah, why apologize? He thought. Emily looked at him coldly. Are you late again? She asked casually, leaning against the door frame. Yes, there was an emergency meeting at the office. Mark placed the case at the entrance. You know, we are in the hot season now. I know, her voice sounded evenly, almost without expression. I hope your talented employee was there too. Mark reacted only with a long, heavy exhale. He walked past her into the living room and threw his jacket on the sofa. His heart was pounding in his temples. He felt that a scandal was on the way, but he was terribly tired of endless suspicions. The dim light of the lamp illuminated their cozy living room with beige walls, neatly arranged furniture, and a fireplace built into the wall. It would seem that the house breathed the warmth of family, but the atmosphere in it had long since become cool. Emily followed, sat down on the chair opposite the sofa, and, intertwining her hands on her chest, looked at her husband with an appraising gaze. What's the matter, Emily? Mark couldn't stand the drawn-out pause. I'm tired of making excuses. What's the matter? She echoed. I just don't like that you and I don't spend any time together. You leave early, you come late. You yourself are constantly going somewhere unknown, he objected. It worries me too, but at least I'm trying to understand you. But you don't. Why should I understand you when you mess around with Sarah and praise her every day? Mark stood up. His whole face expressed a mixture of anger and bewilderment. I will repeat once again, there is no personal relationship between me and Sarah. This is purely work. Yes, she is capable, yes, I praise her like any employee who works well. You know me. Do I know well? Emily smiled wryly. Maybe I thought I knew you, but now I'm not sure. He was about to object, but noticed how her hands were shaking. It's as if deep down she is afraid of something much stronger than just jealousy. Pity for his wife stirred in his soul, but fatigue from the endless attacks overshadowed this pity. I'm going to take a shower, Mark said quietly. Let's talk tomorrow, and not in a raised voice. With these words, he went up to the second floor. Emily was left sitting in the empty living room and felt an angry lump forming in her throat. He doesn't understand me. He never understood me, she thought, justifying herself, suppressing thoughts of her own betrayal. After all, it's easier to blame someone else than to admit to a terrible act. The next day, Emily decided that she needed to take matters into her own hands. She began to write to Mark more often during the day, demanding an account of where he was and with whom. Post 9:30. Are you already in the office? How's the road? Message 2945. Who is at your meeting? Is Sarah there? Message 3:10:15. Why don't you answer? Have your phones been turned off? Such tactics were new to her before. She trusted her husband and did not interfere in his work routine. But now the feeling of guilt was mixed with jealousy and self-loathing. This jealousy, like a poisonous vine, increasingly entangled her consciousness. Mark, receiving these messages, was at a loss. What is happening to her? Why is there such a fuss about Sarah? He tried to respond briefly, but his irritation grew. Mark 10:20. Emily, I have a meeting. I can't be distracted. Let's talk tonight. Emily 10:22. Of course, in the evening you will come at 9 and you will be tired. And I've been sitting here all day in the dark. I could have answered. Mark gritted his teeth and put the phone face down. At the planning meeting with senior managers, he looked gloomy, which did not escape Sarah's attentive gaze. Mark, is everything okay? She asked quietly, stepping aside during the break. Yes, he wanted to add something, but fell silent, realizing how ambiguous these words would sound. The whole day passed in a tense exchange of occasional messages in which Emily insisted that Mark arrive early. He replied that he was doing everything possible, but the office was in shambles. In fact, he really couldn't just leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, since 3 major projects were being prepared for their advertising company at once. Towards evening, Emily called him. Mark, come home right now, steely notes were heard in the voice. Emily, I can't. He tried to speak calmly. I answer to the director. I have people subordinate to me. Then I'll come to the office and see for myself how you work with Sarah, she blurted out. Are you threatening me? Mark went cold. What nonsense. She hung up. The man's heart sank. Will she really come now and make a scene in front of everyone? He quickly went to the director and said that he had an extremely pressing family matter. I had to cancel evening meetings and leave to avoid shame in the team. When Mark parked at the house, the sky was beginning to become overcast with gray clouds. The spring rain was either gathering or hesitating whether to start. Emily stood on the porch in a raincoat, slightly hunched over from the wind, with a phone in her hand. When she saw the car, she quickly approached, her heels clicking on the path. Well, finally, she said, not letting her husband get out of the car. I thought I'd have to drag myself to your office. Can you explain to me what is happening? Mark jumped out of the salon, slamming the door loudly. What do you want to achieve with such scenes? Scenes? Her voice trembled. I wonder how you would react if I spent all my time with some guy at work and at the same time smiled, praised him, and said that he was a genius. I would have reacted differently, Mark answered wearily. I wouldn't pursue, control, or drive you crazy. They entered the house. The living room was dimly lit and the TV was turned off, as if emphasizing the oppressive atmosphere. Emily threw her cloak onto the chair. Am I in control? Yes, damn it, I'm in control because I can't do otherwise. She raised her voice. I don't have the feeling that you need me. What do you want me to do? Fired Sarah, stopped going to work. Mark began to raise his voice in response. Or did I just sit at home until you decide that I'm forgiven? Maybe it would be a good idea to fire her. Emily turned to him with a challenge in her eyes. Then I'll make sure you don't touch each other. We don't touch anyway. Mark was breathing heavily, clenching his fists. Emily, you're annoying me. I love you, but your tone, your demands, it's too much. I can't work in these conditions. It's either her or me, Emily snapped. Think. She quickly turned around and went upstairs, loudly stomping down the steps. Mark remained downstairs, trying to comprehend everything that was happening. He felt a mixture of shock and despair. His wife was demanding that a valuable employee be fired without a single objective reason. He knew deep down that he would not agree to this. But how then to save the marriage? While quarrels raged at home, Emily had another source of constant tension volume. He didn't disappear after their chance encounter at the motel. At first, she ignored his calls and messages, but a week after their intimacy, she suddenly called back herself. Hi, she said hesitantly when he answered. We need to talk. I'm glad you decided to get in touch. Tom's voice was filled with satisfaction. I already thought you forgot about me. I didn't forget, I was just busy. Both mentally and physically, I don't know what to do next. Let's meet, he suggested. Maybe in the car somewhere? I don't want to sit in bars, it's too crowded. Two forces were still fighting in Emily's soul. The desire to say no to him and end this crazy story, and a strange attraction to his energetic, cynical nature. Her determination to leave Tom paled against the growing feeling that she was already bogged down in this lie. Late in the evening, having lied to Mark that she urgently needed to finish a project in the studio, she arrived in Tom's car in the parking lot near the Quail Springs Mall. This place was already half empty, only rare late visitors returning with purchases. Have a seat, Tom said, opening the passenger door. How are you? Disgusting, she slammed the door. There was a subtle smell of expensive men's perfume in the cabin. I constantly quarrel with my husband. He doubts me, although he himself. Although yourself, what? Tom interrupted. Do you think he's really cheating with Sarah? I don't know anymore, Emily answered sadly. Maybe he's not cheating. But his attitude, his constant praise of her, all this drives me crazy. Yes, and I cheated on him first, it turns out. I don't have the strength anymore, she whispered, looking out the window. I feel like everything is falling apart. Tom put his hand on her shoulder, and Emily didn't move away. She turned to him. In his gaze, one could read not so much love as the desire and excitement of a hunter. It seemed to her that in his arms she would at least for some time forget about the doubts tearing her soul apart. "You see," he said muffledly, "Sarah doesn't walk around like herself either. I see that she constantly has a phone in her hands. She is texting with someone. But she says it's work. Maybe your mark has nothing to do with it. Or maybe it has something to do with it. I don't know. Maybe their connection is only in my head." Emily sighed. "But one way or another, I already did what I did." They sat for several minutes in silence. Cold drops began to knock on the windshield. The rain finally decided to start. The dim light of the shopping center lights reflected on the glass. Cars honked in the distance, people hurried home, and in this cramped cabin a new betrayal was born. "I want to kiss you," Tom suddenly said, approaching. "No need," she bowed her head, but made no attempt to leave. "Everything is too complicated for us. That's why it's worth it." He ran his hand over her neck. "This will help take your mind off things." Despair flashed inside Emily. She realized that she could not and did not want to resist this craving for Tom. Mark's words that she had become different echoed in her head. And in this car, to the sound of the rain, they merged again in a short, passionate kiss, which seemed to set a new point of no return. The next day, Emily woke up with a heavy head. She lies to her husband again, secretly meets with Tom, and the quarrels only become more frequent. And Tom began to increasingly influence her decisions. He did not hide his goal. Volume message at lunch. "When will we see each other again? I miss you, and we also have a lot to talk about. By the way, I urgently need to discuss a real estate project." His impudence was amazing. He understood perfectly well that there was a war going on in her life, but continued to insistently demand intimacy. Emily answered briefly that now is not the time, but inside she understood. She herself had opened Pandora's box. At the same time, her jealousy towards Sarah did not disappear. Moreover, she began to interrogate Mark. Was he going to go somewhere with her on a business trip? Doesn't he go with her to business meetings? "I want you to stay away from her," Emily repeated. Mark was indignant. "How can I stay away if she is my subordinate, and we are required to communicate on projects?" "You're out of your mind, Emily." As a result, Mark began to distance himself as much as possible from Sarah in front of Emily. For example, he did not answer her calls in front of his wife or went into another room so as not to provoke. But at home, this only increased the tension. Emily suspected that he was hiding something. Mark sat in his office late at night, when the office was almost empty. Only a few people stayed late, including Sarah, who was finishing her report. The lights of Oklahoma City sparkled outside the window, and the distant sounds of cars on the highway were heard. The thought was spinning in his head, what to do with Emily? He raised his eyes and saw his reflection in the dark glass of the window, a tired man with a shadow of despair on his face. I remembered those calm years when he and Emily were an almost perfect couple. They supported each other and laughed. What went wrong now? Remembering her aggressive behavior and constant suspicions, he decided that he had to somehow get to the bottom of the truth. She herself began to disappear often, and once even returned in the morning, justifying this by the fact that she was late with a friend in a bar. Of course, since she hints at his infidelity, then perhaps she herself is hiding something. Otherwise, where does such painful jealousy come from? Answers were needed. Never before had it occurred to Mark to hire a private detective. He grew up in a family of simple but honest people and believed in openness and dialogue. But in recent weeks, Emily has become closed to dialogue, and his own attempts to resolve the conflict have hit a wall. If it seems to me that she is lying and hiding something, Mark thought, then I need to check. Will I save my marriage? Don't know. But at least I'll stop being tormented by guesses. He took out his phone and opened his browser, typing into the search, Oklahoma City Private Eye Recommendations. Several options popped up on the screen. I chose one with decent reviews, the Hadley and Partners Detective Agency, whose website looked professional. Initial consultation is free, the advertising slogan read. His heart was pounding. He felt that he was crossing a moral line, violating his wife's personal space. But my mind prompted, she herself is pushing me to do this. The next day, having lied at home that he had an urgent work meeting, Mark drove up to a modest office building on the outskirts of the city. The door was opened to him by a man of about 40, a detective named Harry Hadley, thin, with sharp features, in a simple suit, and with a tenacious gaze. "Mr. Wilson, please come in." Harry nodded and pointed to a chair near the table. "How can I help?" "I have a family problem," Mark began, trying to find the words. "My wife behaves strangely. She suspects me of everything and makes scandals for no reason. I want to understand if she herself has any connections on the side." The detective lowered his voice with professional restraint. "This happens often. You know, paranoid jealousy is often associated with the cheating partner's own feelings of guilt." "Yes, I thought about that too, but I have no direct evidence, only intuition." Harry Hadley listened to a short retelling of the story. Then he carefully clarified what kind of evidence Mark needed: photographs, reports about where Emily was and with whom, perhaps correspondence on social networks. Mark felt terrible discussing this with a stranger, but his determination prevailed. "I want the truth," he said firmly. "If she really is cheating, I need to know." "Okay," Harry opened his notebook. "First, tell me all the places where she usually goes, her studio, phone numbers, and social networks. We will try to create a route and follow it carefully. Advance payment half the amount. If there is a need to expand the check, we will discuss it separately." Mark nodded, although inside he felt like he had become the hero of a cheap detective series. Averting his gaze, he handed over the necessary information and signed the contract. "Harry promised to contact me as soon as the first results appeared." "Just please do everything as carefully as possible," Mark asked. "I don't want to ruin the marriage if everything turns out to be my mistake." "Understand. Confidentiality is our priority," Harry assured. On the way home, Mark was torn by feelings: shame that he had gone under surveillance, and relief that he would soon find out the truth, whatever it may be. That evening, Emily returned home relatively early at 7. Mark was already home by that time. He deliberately shortened his work hours to try to have a heart-to-heart talk again. But when she entered, he noticed that her eyes were red, her face was tense, and her hair smelled of someone else's perfume. "Hi," he said, trying to speak softly. "Do you want dinner? I ordered Chinese takeout. I took some noodles and chicken for you." "Thank you," she answered briefly, putting her bag away in the hallway. "I'm terribly tired. I was visiting a client near Bethany. There's traffic jams there." "Are you okay?" He took a step closer, trying to hug her. "Yeah, okay," she pulled away. "I'm just tired and want to be alone." Mark noticed that she was nervously putting her phone in her pocket. Maybe someone called her. Or did you write messages? Of course, he looked at everything differently now, after his visit to the detective. He decided not to provoke her with questions. "Okay, I won't bother you," he said. "But if you want to talk, I'm in the kitchen." She went into the bathroom. Mark was left alone with his thoughts. He tried to understand whether he felt love for this woman, the one who was now withdrawing, holding back, pushing him away. Maybe he still loved the memories of her, and not the real Emily, who was now different. "Please don't let the detective find anything," flashed through his mind. "Let this all be a mistake." While Mark was tormented by doubts, detective work began in full swing. Harry Hadley and his assistants began discreetly to guide Emily. Her car was monitored, and the places where she stopped were tracked. Within a couple of days, the first leads appeared. She regularly drove into an outlying parking lot near closed shopping centers, and sometimes she was seen with a certain man who put her in his black sedan. The photos have so far come out unclear: late evening, poor lighting. Harry told Mark that there was a possibility that this was her lover, but more solid evidence needs to be collected. Mark winced when he heard the word lover, but agreed to continue. "Okay," he said into the phone, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "Do whatever you need to do." Around this time, Emily and Tom met for the third time in a month. This time, they chose a motel on I-240 to be away from the usual routes. He rented a room without attracting attention from the front desk, paying in cash. "How are you?" Tom asked, watching Emily nervously fiddle with the hem of her cloak. "I don't know what came over me," she said quietly. "My husband has completely gone crazy. He's offended all the time. We quarrel. Maybe you should leave him," Tom suggested suggestively, placing his hands on her shoulders. "I know this sounds drastic, but you feel bad around Mark." "Leave?" Emily smiled bitterly. "I'm not sure I want this. I put so much effort into our marriage, into our home. And you're married too. I always say, life is short." Tom pulled her closer to him. "If you and I have feelings." "We have no feelings," she interrupted, clenching her fists. "We have passion, madness, desire. But I don't know if I can call it feelings." They spent about an hour in the room, seizing moments of intimacy that further enveloped their conscience with a feeling of guilt and forbidden pleasure. And meanwhile, in a car in the parking lot nearby, a man with a camera was sitting one of Harry's assistants. He had already taken pictures of Tom's car license plates and managed to take a few shots of Emily getting out of the sedan. The figures are semi-darkness, but the faces can be recognized when zoomed in. "That's it," thought the assistant detective, taking a series of photographs with a large zoom. "We'll give the materials to Mr. Hadley in the morning." A week after the start of observation, Harry Hadley called Mark and said that there is a serious conversation and it is better to meet in person. It happened early in the morning. Mark was just getting ready for work. Under a plausible pretext, "I need to go to a client's office," he went to the same part of the city where the detective agency was located. Harry met him in a small conference room. There was a folder with papers and a flash drive on the table. "Have a seat, Mr. Wilson," said the detective, sighing. "I'm sorry, but the information is clear." "I see," Mark whispered, noticing how Harry was looking at him sympathetically. "Tell me what you found out." The detective turned the folder over. There were reports about Emily's routes, her meetings in dark places, schedules for approaching certain addresses. Then he turned on a few photos on the laptop. Grainy, but distinguishable silhouettes of Emily and Tom hugging near a car, entering a motel room. Harry moved the cursor to one of the photographs, where Emily stood at the entrance with a man. "His name is Tom Rivers, based on the car's license plates and our checks. We tracked down that he works in real estate. We also managed to capture the moment they left the motel together." "Oh God." Mark covered his eyes with his hand, trying to hold back the wave of anger and pain that swept over him. "How many times did they meet there?" "We recorded 3 cases. There may be more, but we have enough materials to talk about a systematic nature." Emily's face was visible in the photographs. Mark recognized her coat, her bag. Suddenly, the thought flashed. So she was lying when she said that she was with a client in the evening. Everything swam before my eyes from the confusion of emotions. "In addition, we have screenshots of some messages." The detective opened the report. "We caught phone numbers and recorded that your wife and this Tom often text and call each other in the evenings. The text of the messages themselves is more difficult to intercept, but the fact of interaction is obvious." Mark felt like everything was collapsing in his soul. The same woman who was so jealous of him for Sarah actually cheated on him. Paradox. Disbelief gave way to rage. "How could she?" shouted an inner voice. "Why these scenes with Sarah if she herself?" The detective softly suggested, "I know a good family lawyer if you decide to file for divorce." "Yes," Mark squeezed out, although his throat was constricting. "Give me the coordinates." He thanked Harry for his work and took the printouts and flash drive. On the way to the car, his hands were shaking. He wanted to tear it all up, burn it, forget it. But the truth will not disappear. This is the end, he realized as he got behind the wheel. Instead of going to work, Mark headed home. Emily was still there at that time according to her schedule. The meeting in the studio did not start early. He burst into the house, slamming the door, and found her in the living room. "Mark, what's happened?" she asked in surprise, noticing his face twisted with anger. "Happened?" he almost shouted, throwing the folder on the table. "Look, damn, look at this." Emily recoiled, but took the sheets of photographs. In one of them, she immediately recognized herself and Tom at the motel. My heart sank somewhere down. My hands began to tremble. He hired a detective, flashed through her head. "This is where?" she whispered, turning pale. "Where?" "From the professionals I hired to find out the truth," Mark said, his voice shaking with rage. "It turns out that you've been lying to me for a long time. With Tom Rivers, right? The husband of Sarah, whom you always pressured as if she was my mistress." Emily didn't know what to say. She understood that there could be no words of justification here. But instinctively, I tried. "Mark, wait. It happened somehow by accident. I myself don't know why. Accidentally." He was ready to explode. "You can kiss someone once by chance and not go to motels every week and lie at every turn. Do you still dare to call me a liar? Like, am I somewhere with Sarah? Damn, I was crystal clear in front of you." Tears of resentment and powerlessness fell on Emily. She dropped the photographs and frantically pressed her hands to her face. But at the sight of her tears, Mark did not soften. On the contrary, he felt even more indignant. "Now she's going to cry and play the victim," he thought with rage. "Don't you dare shift the blame onto me," he barked, hitting the back of the sofa with his fist. "I didn't have anything other than a working relationship with Sarah, and it couldn't have happened because I'm a married man, and for me, this is of great importance. And if I wanted to be with someone else, I would first divorce you and not run to the left." Their voices overlapped with each other. The scandal has reached a new level. Emily realized that it was all over, that her deception had been exposed. This caused despair to rage inside, and yet she tried to go on the attack. "So, you hired detectives to keep an eye on me? What right did you have?" "Right?" Mark laughed bitterly. "What right did you have to cheat on me? You yourself made me suspect your lies. Do you think I'm blind and don't notice anything?" A few more minutes of angry reproaches, and he rushed out of the room. A minute later, he returned with a suitcase, into which he threw the first things he came across. Emily stood petrified, seeing how he was destroying their lives literally before their eyes. "I'm leaving," Mark said from the doorway. "And yes, I'm filing for divorce." The front door slammed shut. Emily seemed to wake up from the sound and collapsed on the sofa. Tears rolled in, only one thought was beating in my head. "It's over. I ruined everything." Mark drove out of the city onto the highway, not knowing where he was going. I just needed to get away from home, where everything was saturated with lies. Finally, I stopped at a roadside cafe where time seemed to stand still. An old-fashioned neon sign, the occasional truck in the parking lot. He got out of the car to take a few breaths of cool air and come to his senses. Divorce. This word seemed like a heavy stone squeezing my chest. Did he really want to destroy their marriage, or did she destroy it herself? Their entire world together fell apart like a house of cards. Under the soothing hum of the cafe's air conditioners, Mark took out his phone and dialed the number of the lawyer the detective had recommended. He explained the situation in brief phrases. The lawyer asked to provide evidence of treason. "Of course, I have everything," Mark thought bitterly. Less than an hour later, they agreed to meet the next day. "That's it, there's no turning back," Mark concluded, returning to the car. He felt rage pulsating inside him, but along with it, a sharp, piercing pain of loss. The next morning, Emily sat in the kitchen, surrounded by empty teacups. The night passed in tears, calls to girlfriends, and even several desperate messages to Tom, to which for some reason he did not respond. Perhaps he was afraid of a scandal or decided not to get involved in other people's family squabbles. At 9 in the morning, there was the sound of a door opening. Emily perked up. "Is Mark really back?" She rushed into the hallway and saw her husband. But he did not look softened, rather, even more determined. "Mark, I'm sorry," she tried to approach, but he raised his hand, signaling that she should not approach. "I came for documents," he said coldly. "I need certificates of ownership, bank papers. I'm preparing a divorce suit. Please." Her voice broke into a whisper. "Let's talk. I know I made a terrible mistake, but we can try to start again." "Start again?" He laughed bitterly. "Why suddenly? So that you lie again? Emily, understand that this is not just a mistake. This is betrayal. Instead of trusting me, you cheated yourself." She tried to grab his hand, but he pulled away. In Mark's eyes, there was a sharp pain that grew into cold inflexibility. "Consider that I made a choice a long time ago," he said, walking to the cabinet where the documents were kept. "We will discuss everything in the presence of lawyers." "Wait," Emily sobbed. "You must understand why I did this. I thought that you and Sarah—" "I felt lonely." "Loneliness?" Mark clenched his teeth, taking out the folders. "I put all my strength into our family. He worked so that we could have a house, a car, and comfort. Have you decided that they don't love you?" She stopped talking to me, but went to Tom. "You had to trust me. I never gave you any reason to doubt. But you chose deception." Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks. "Mark, I'm ready for anything if only you stay. Let's go to a family psychologist, to a pastor, to anyone. It's too late," he answered sternly. "My feelings are killed, as is my trust." With these words, he left, slamming the door. He had a heavy folder in his hands. Emily fell onto the couch, hugging her knees to her chest, realizing that her pleas had no effect. Against her better judgment, Emily suddenly decided that she still had to get revenge on Sarah. After all, it was with her, in her perverted logic, that it all began. She was convinced that Mark secretly harbored feelings for Sarah, and this situation pushed her into Tom's arms. Emotionally, she put on her coat, got into her car, and drove to Mark's office. Although she understood that Mark would no longer be happy to see her, she could still find Sarah there. At the office, the receptionist recognized her. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Wilson. Mark is away now. He just left." "I don't need Mark," Emily said coldly. "I want to see Sarah." The receptionist looked confused, and then called Sarah and said that Mrs. Wilson is looking for you. Yes, the boss's wife. A couple of minutes later, Sarah came out into the reception area. She looked wary. "Emily, hello, did something happen?" "Yes, it happened," Emily hissed, trying to speak quietly so as not to attract the attention of her colleagues. "You ruined my marriage." Sarah turned pale. Horror flashed in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "Don't pretend to be an innocent lamb," Emily hissed. "You were next to Mark all the time. He admired you, and I felt unnecessary. And because of this, I made a mistake." "Wait," Sarah took a step back. "Emily, I never tried to take Mark away from the family. For myself. I'm married. I didn't mess with your husband. We just worked together. We have a business relationship." "You're lying," Emily exclaimed. "I saw how you look at him." "How? With respect to the boss?" "Yes." Sarah couldn't hold back anymore. "Mark is only a boss for me who gave me a chance to prove myself. No feelings other than professional ones. I have a husband, Tom." "Yes," was all Emily said, unable to find words. But Sarah didn't understand anything. For her, it looked like strange behavior from the boss's aggressive wife, who suddenly blew away. The reception area was filled with frightened glances from other employees. Realizing that she risked causing a scandal in front of everyone, Sarah decisively added, "Sorry, but I don't want to continue this conversation. I'm not to blame for your family problems." With these words, she walked away, trying to stay upright. Emily stood in the middle of the office hall, feeling that curious eyes were looking at her and whispering something behind her. She felt unbearably ashamed. "God, what am I even doing?" she thought, rushing out into the street. The next day, Mark's first meeting with a lawyer took place, and the formal filing for divorce took place. Among other things, the lawyer asked Mark whether he planned to demand alimony, compensation, and how they would divide the property. Mark didn't want to take their common home from Emily by force, but he couldn't live there anymore. "I want everything to be according to the law," he told the lawyer. "I don't want revenge. I just want to make a point." "I understand," the lawyer nodded. "Then we will submit a standard package, attaching evidence of infidelity. The court will take your side. Most likely everything will go quickly." For several days, Emily tried to call Mark to beg for forgiveness. He didn't answer. Tom also did not get in touch. Apparently, having learned about the major scandal, he decided to distance himself from the situation so as not to completely ruin his reputation in the real estate world. "Damn coward," thought Emily bitterly, who had neither a husband nor a lover left. The day came when Emily received a subpoena and copies of the divorce papers. When she read the wording, the indicated articles and facts, she was overcome by a new feeling of hopelessness. "This is all real," flashed through my head. "We're really getting a divorce, and not just quarreling for a week." She sat for hours in the empty house. Now there were no noises, no smiles, no smells of her favorite dishes. Only the rustle of the wind outside the windows and the hum of the refrigerator. At some point from her thoughts, she realized that she urgently needed alcohol to numb the pain. The court scheduled the first hearing. Emily and Mark met in the hallway of the courthouse, where divorce and child custody cases were usually heard. They did not have children together, which to some extent simplified legal procedures. But emotionally, this did not make the situation any easier. Emily got out of the elevator and saw Mark. He was standing with a lawyer, leafing through some papers. She wanted to speak, but didn't dare. He didn't even look at her, just nodded briefly in greeting. She felt devastated. The once closest person now looked at her as if she were a stranger. In the courtroom, everything went pretty quickly. Mark's lawyer presented evidence of treason, referred to photographs and the detective's report. Emily's lawyer, whom she had hired hastily, tried to argue that her husband was not providing emotional support, but that seemed pale against the overwhelming evidence. "I ask for the maximum simplification of the divorce procedure," Mark firmly told the judge. "We want to separate without further squabbles." The judge announced that he would make a final decision in a few weeks after the formalities. In fact, everything was already clear. The marriage was declared dissolved due to Emily's fault. In the corridor, she tried to talk to Marcoma. "Mark," her voice trembled, "are you sure this is right? Maybe we should at least talk." "Everything has already been said," he answered silently, without even turning around. "Take care of yourself." And he left, leaving her standing in the middle of the gray corridor, where a couple of people were waiting for their next cases. Lawyers and court secretaries were milling about. The grayness of the walls was depressing. Emily stood alone for a long time, realizing that she had just lost the person who meant everything to her and lost it through her own stupidity. In the suburban area where Emily's parents' house was located, there was silence. Only the trees rustled their leaves under the gusts of a cool spring wind. In the kitchen of this small but cozy house, Mrs. Ellen Roberts, Emily's mother, was preparing coffee in an antique coffee maker. She stood on the stove and whistled. Her husband, Mr. Harold Roberts, sat at the dining table and gloomily read the newspaper. Usually at this time, Emily would sometimes stop by her parents' house for breakfast and talk, but now it had been more than 2 weeks since she had appeared. Her voice sounded strained on the phone, and she had difficulty finding the words to talk. But today Ellen and Harold had much more serious reasons for worry. The night before, Emily herself called them and, through tears, said that Mark had left home and filed for divorce. When Ellen heard the word divorce, she went cold. Raised in the tradition of strong family ties, she believed that marriage should be preserved at all costs. Being a powerful and strict woman, Ellen was used to protecting her daughter and did not even want to admit the thought that Emily had committed some irreparable act. Harold, on the other hand, had long felt tired of constant conflict, but usually refrained from commenting. Now, sitting at the table, Harold looked at his wife over the newspaper. "Ellen," he said quietly, "maybe we shouldn't interfere." Emily is no longer a girl, she is 32. She is responsible for her own life. I can't just sit and watch her marriage crumble, Ellen said, putting a cup of coffee on the table. She said that Mark left, and now they only meet in court. Is this normal? Isn't it possible to settle everything and talk? But she admitted that. Harold paused, remembering fragments of his daughter's words. That she messed up, ruined everything. Mark doesn't want to listen. I admitted to some kind of misunderstanding, Ellen interrupted. You never know, maybe she's exaggerating, and he's just offended. You know what men are like. Sometimes they are hot-tempered and do not know how to forgive. We need to correct them. Ellen, accustomed to supporting her daughter in everything, did not fully understand what exactly had happened. She was sure that the quarrel could be resolved if she simply put pressure on Mark with the right words after all. Before that he seemed to be a calm and balanced person. Harold remained silent. He felt that the matter was more serious than a minor quarrel. It was only a few days after the first court hearing where Mark and Emily discussed the details of the divorce when Ellen decided to take action. She got through to Mark and asked him for a personal meeting, citing an important family matter. Mark at first wanted to refuse, but then he thought that it was better to dot all the I's right away. He made an appointment at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. In the morning, Ellen and Harold drove up to the Sunset Lake Cafe. It was a discreet establishment with a simple interior and soft lighting. Mark was already sitting at the table, bending over a cup of black coffee. When he saw Emily's parents, he stood up and nodded politely. "Good morning," Ellen said hesitantly, sitting down opposite Mark. Harold sat down next to his wife. "Good," Mark responded. His face was cold, clearly not expressing joy. "Is there something you wanted to discuss?" Ellen stole a glance at his hands. She noticed that the wedding ring had disappeared. Mark had always worn it before, and this ring seemed to be a symbol of his devotion to his family. "We want to understand what's going on," Ellen began. "Emily says that you left, that you filed for divorce." "Yes," he confirmed, trying to speak evenly. "I made this decision because I no longer see the possibility of saving our marriage." Ellen frowned. "But why so abruptly? Everyone has crises, but you can make peace if you love each other. Emily, she's worried, she can't live without you." "Do you think I left just on a whim?" There was bitterness in Mark's voice. "Let's say it straight. Emily cheated on me. Moreover, she did this not just once, but systematically." Ellen froze, her heart sank. Harold sighed heavily. It seemed that he guessed what was going on, but did not think that it would be so openly voiced. "Mark," Ellen stammered, "maybe this is some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe she just, well, something happened by accident." "Accidentally." Mark smiled bitterly. "Meetings in motels, secret correspondence, lies about meetings with clients. Does this look like a one-time mistake? I hired a detective. I have irrefutable evidence." He laid out several photographs on the table, taken in poor lighting, but clear enough to recognize Emily's face in the company of another man. Ellen turned pale at the sight of these pictures. Harold pursed his lips, trying to remain calm. "Damn," he whispered, looking away. "Emily has never been like this. I don't understand." "I don't understand either," Mark said sharply. "But this is a fact. And understand, I didn't come here for you to dissuade me. My choice is made. I don't trust your daughter anymore." Ellen was still trying to say something. Harold rubbed his temples. "Son, if you allow me, I'll call you that." He began quietly. "I understand that she is to blame. But still, maybe give her a chance. You have been together for many years." Mark shook his head. "Do you think I wouldn't give it a chance if I could? She broke my trust. I tried to talk to her, but she continued to lie, create scandals, and throw accusations. I'm tired of these lies. Sorry, but I won't be back." Ellen felt everything shrink inside. She saw firm determination in Mark's eyes, the feeling that he was with a heavy heart, but was irrevocably going to break. "The arguments are over." Tears welled up, but she tried to hide them behind a stern expression on her face. "Let's do this. I'm not asking you to interfere." Mark said, realizing that Emily's parents were now in shock. I understand that she is your daughter and you will be on her side. But we have a lawsuit, and I'm sure I'm right. With these words, he stood up. Sorry, I can't stay longer. It's time for me to go to work. I just wanted you to know the truth. And without turning around, he left the cafe. Ellen sat motionless, her hands trembling, her lips pursed. Harold, with his head down, slowly crumpled up the newspaper that lay in front of him. So they spent several minutes in silence, digesting the terrible news their daughter had committed adultery and lost a marriage that seemed ideal. Returning home, Ellen did not know what to do. She was raised in the spirit that bad deeds should be hidden from the public, but within the family they should be cleaned up. But now the secret can no longer be hidden. Thank God Emily didn't have children, otherwise everything would have been even more dramatic. After an hour of nervous thinking, Ellen finally dialed her daughter's number. Emily, she said in a tired voice, we talked to Mark. He showed us. Photographs. Photos. Emily on the other end of the line felt everything inside her shrinking. So, he told you that I... Yes, Ellen breathed. Why, baby? Why did you do this? Mom, Emily struggled to squeeze out the words, I don't know. It seemed to me that Mark was carried away by another woman, and I lost my head. Then everything started spinning. Didn't it occur to you to just talk to him before doing such things? Ellen's voice sounded stern. Do you realize that he will never forgive you? I understand, Emily whispered. I ask him, I cry, but he doesn't want to listen. It's my fault, Mom. But is it really impossible to fix it? I tried to convince him, but he is adamant. Ellen said bitterly, come to us, let's talk. We need to decide something. We can't leave you. Emily was silent for a few seconds, then agreed. Yes, I'll come in the evening. She understood that this conversation would be difficult, but she had no one else to go to. Tom disappeared. Her friends did not understand her actions. Mark rejected her. Parents remained the last support, even if they were horrified by what happened. In the evening, when Emily arrived at her parents' house, her mother greeted her almost with reproaches. We have invested so much in your education, in your wedding, and you take it and ruin everything. The father seemed to only sigh heavily. Emily felt like a little girl who had done something wrong, but she decided to listen. There was no other choice. After all, she needed to get support from somewhere, even if it was harsh. Her parents made it clear. It's unlikely that anything can be saved in this marriage, but they are ready to help her get her thoughts together, provide at least some financial support if necessary, and at the same time convince her not to fall even lower. Several days have passed since Mark's conversation with Emily's parents in the cafe. Immersed in work, he tried to distract himself from the mental pain he experienced, remembering his wife's betrayal. But by evening, only a few people remained in the office, among them Sarah, who was finishing a large report for a new client. Mark noticed her sitting in the conference room, looking tired. Sarah, it seemed, also had personal problems. She began to stay longer, occasionally left the office for some calls, and often looked upset. And although Mark had previously tried not to meddle in other people's family affairs, now quite a few parallels appeared in his life. He knew that Sarah's husband was his wife's lover, and now that he had gathered his courage, he decided to talk to Sarah openly. Mark entered the conference room and quietly closed the door behind him. Sarah, he said quietly, can I have a few words with you? Of course, she looked up from her papers. Is everything okay, boss? Mark thought for a moment about how to begin. For the first time, he felt vulnerable in front of a subordinate, with whom he had always been extremely professional. Remember, you said that you have problems in your family? He said slowly. I need to say something about this. Yes, Sarah lowered her eyes. Tom and I haven't been doing well for a long time. He disappears somewhere. He has a lot of excuses, and I suspect that he has another one. But we never talk about it directly. I learned something that seems to confirm your suspicions, Mark managed, feeling his throat go dry. I'm very sorry, but your husband, Tom Rivers, had an affair. With my wife, Emily. There was a tense pause. Sarah looked at Mark with wide eyes, as if she did not immediately understand the meaning of what she heard. Her face suddenly turned pale, her hands trembled. She swallowed convulsively. What? Are you? Are you sure? Yes, I'm more than sure. Mark didn't know how to tell the truth more gently. I hired a detective. I have evidence. Sorry to say this now, and perhaps not tactfully, but I think we both need to know the reality. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to burst into tears right there in the office. Everything turned upside down inside her. Such an unequivocal confession meant that her intuition was correct. And this man, whom she respected as a boss, is now the same deceived husband. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she tried to control herself. Oh God, Sarah whispered. How? How did this all happen? I don't fully understand it myself. Emily suspected me of being unfaithful with you, can you imagine? But it turned out that she herself went to see her husband. Mark sighed. I'm sorry, I'm very sorry that this affected you too. Sarah sat in silence for several seconds, and then suddenly dropped her head into her hands and began to cry quietly. Mark didn't dare touch her, he just stood next to her, feeling the weight of his own hopelessness. When she raised her face a minute or two later, she was in tears. I don't know what to do. So Tom has been lying to me all this time, and it turns out that your marriage is also broken. Yes, I filed for divorce, Mark said, trying to hold back the pain. And frankly, you will also have to think about your next steps. They sat in the conference room for about another hour. At first, Sarah could not come to her senses. It seemed to her that her life was collapsing. But then, when the first shock subsided, she began to ask Mark about what she should do with Tom and how to build a legal line in general. Have you hired a lawyer? Sarah asked, wiping her tears with a handkerchief. Maybe you can tell me who to contact. I never thought that I would have to get a divorce. Yes, of course, Mark nodded. I can give you the contact information of my lawyer. He specializes in divorce proceedings. Or I can recommend a couple more. I understand that this is all difficult, but sometimes a lawyer is the only defense against injustice. He took a business card holder out of his bag and handed Sarah several cards. Sarah, cursing her unfaithful husband to herself, carefully put them in her wallet. She was still scared. She and Tom had a mortgage and bought a small house. What will happen now? I should probably at least get some counseling, she muttered, clutching the cards in her hands. I don't know, maybe Tom will try to take the house, or, on the contrary, get into debt. That's why it's better to find out everything in advance. And yet, Mark paused. Sorry if this is too personal, but you have a child, right? You once mentioned. Yes, daughter, she's 5 years old. Sarah's voice trembled. I can't believe that we'll have to share custody, or that he could refuse to help us at all. When she remembered her daughter, she felt very bad. After all, the girl loved her dad. I, I'll help you as best I can, Mark said tiredly. Even though I'm going through hell myself, I understand that it's not easier for you now. We were both victims of their betrayal. Thank you. Sarah looked at him with gratitude, albeit through tears. I don't know how I would have coped without your advice. They agreed that she would contact a lawyer, and if any financial advice or recommendations were needed, Mark would help with the specialists he had already found for his divorce process. He also felt a little better from the realization that he was not the only one suffering. There was a person who shared his pain and understood the feelings of betrayal. That same evening, Sarah was sitting at home. She sent her husband an SMS and continued to immerse herself in thoughts about the future. She managed to put her daughter to bed, and she drank soothing tea. It was starting to rain outside, and a street lamp was flickering outside the window. And then the phone rang. Sarah glanced at the screen. Volume. Sarah replied, Hello. Sarah, said the familiar voice of her husband. I need to talk to you urgently. About what? She asked chokedly, trying to speak quietly so as not to wake her daughter. Well, Tom paused, obviously searching for words. You see, I understand that we had problems, but I don't want to deprive our daughter of a normal family. Maybe we can try to fix everything somehow? Sarah almost laughed out loud at such impudence. Does he think that after everything I will listen to these persuasions? Flashed through her head. Set it up, she exclaimed, barely containing her anger. Tom, you cheated on me. I know this for sure, I have proof, and now you're telling me that you want to save your family. Wait, what kind of betrayal? He responded, pretending that he didn't understand. Sarah, don't believe rumors. I just talk to people. With the people at the motel, huh? She interrupted, no longer embarrassed by her raised tone. No need to lie, everything turned out, and I'm not going to pretend that nothing happened. Tom sighed into the phone. Okay, maybe I made a mistake, but let's not destroy everything we have because of one mistake. The child should not suffer. Sarah fell silent. She struggled with anger and maternal feelings for her daughter, who really needed both parents. But the image of Tom hugging another woman literally rose before his eyes. I'm filing for divorce, she finally said decisively. You have violated our family obligations, and I see no way back. Tom tried to object, but Sarah had already turned off the phone. She cried, but felt that she had taken the first step towards liberation. Now she was not a victim of passive lies, but a woman ready to defend her rights. Mark's advice popped into her head, and she understood that she would soon face the same path as him, the official dissolution of the marriage. Emily sat in her design studio, staring at her computer screen, but couldn't concentrate on the drawings. It became more and more difficult to work. Rumors about her personal problems were already beginning to reach management. In addition, one of the key clients, having learned about Emily's dubious reputation, the word affair with a married man was circulating on the sidelines, refused to continue cooperation. Officially, the owner of the studio where Emily worked had no personal enmity towards her, but the company's reputation could suffer due to scandals. Designers often worked closely with clients, and any blemish in their personal lives would sometimes cast a shadow over the entire company. Emily was called to talk to the director. Emily, he began cautiously as she entered his office, we're having problems with a few clients. They demand that the project supervisor be replaced because, they heard about your family troubles and don't want extra negativity. But my personal life should not affect my work. Emily objected hotly. I do my job professionally. I agree, but unfortunately, clients' opinions are often subjective, and they have the right to choose a designer they trust. Emily looked at the director with despair. She understood perfectly well that the studio would not sacrifice profits for the sake of one employee. Her reputation has already been tarnished, and she herself is to blame for this. I can take on small orders, she said, uncertainty. You see, the director thoughtfully turned the pen in his hands. The management believes that it is better to avoid a public scandal, so we will have to part. I'm very sorry. It sounded like a sentence. On paper, it was called termination of the contract by mutual consent, but in fact dismissal. Emily still tried to say something, but the director was adamant. All she had to do was sign the necessary papers and pack her things. Thus, she lost a job that she loved and which brought a good income. At the same time, her personal life was going to hell, and her finances were melting before her eyes. Left without a source of stable income, she understood that she would soon not be able to pay the mortgage for the house if Mark did not finally take it for himself. And where to live? During this same period, her relationship with Tom began to fall apart. More precisely, Tom himself pulled away as soon as he realized that their affair had come out and that he risked losing not only his wife, but also his reputation. He no longer wrote Emily messages, did not call, did not offer meetings. When she tried to call him, he answered coldly, Sorry, I have too much to do right now. Let's talk later. However, later did not come. Emily began to suspect that he was simply using her as some kind of adultery by mutual consent, and now that everything was revealed, he decided to go into the shadows. She felt another betrayal tearing at her soul, although she herself was no less to blame. But still, the pain pierced her with renewed vigor. She lost her husband and lover, and both turned away from her. All that was left was emptiness. "Tom, why are you doing this to me?" she exclaimed one day when she got through to him. "Are you really just going to disappear after everything?" "Emily, what did you want?" "I didn't promise you eternal love," he answered cynically. "We had a common problem, and we solved it. But now everything has changed. I have my own things to do. Sorry." Emily's heart sank. She realized that she was truly left completely alone. No one needs it, everyone has turned away. And then a bitter conviction prevailed inside her that life had lost its meaning. Emily started drinking. At first, it was a couple of glasses of wine in the evening to forget, but very soon the number of glasses grew into bottles. Her parents noticed her condition and tried to reason with her, persuading her to see a psychologist. But Emily just waved it off. "Leave me alone," she said when her mother tried to confiscate her alcohol. "You yourself said that I ruined everything, so at least give me a drink." Ellen looked at her daughter with helplessness, not understanding how to return her to normal life. Harold grumbled that this is no good, and that you should have thought before cheating on your husband, but deep down he suffered, seeing his daughter go downhill. One night, when Emily returned from yet another bar, staggering, she fell to the floor in the hallway of her parents' house. Ellen rushed out of the bedroom and saw her daughter lying, sobbing and unable to get up. "Damn it, Emily," Ellen exclaimed, helping her up. "Look what you're turning into. You need to see a doctor." "Why do I need a doctor?" Emily muttered, barely able to stand. "Nothing will help me anymore." She was ashamed, but with alcohol she drowned out the feeling of guilt and emptiness from the loss of all the support in life. The parents began to think about sending Emily to some clinic, or at least to a psychologist, but everything depended on the wishes of Emily herself. You couldn't force her there, and she seemed to be only plunging into the abyss. Meanwhile, Mark, after several weeks of living either with a friend or in a motel, finally decided that it was time to find his own place to start life with a clean slate. He filed all the divorce papers and the legal process was in full swing. Mark discussed the details of the division of property with a lawyer. The house could go to Emily, but along with the mortgage, if she could continue to pay it. Or the house will have to be sold. While all the proceedings were going on, Mark rented a cozy apartment in the central area of Oklahoma City. His new apartment was in a modern apartment complex with a fitness center and swimming pool on the ground floor. The windows overlooked the park, where he could run in the mornings, as he had done before. At first, when he crossed the threshold of the apartment, he felt emptiness. There were no familiar things, no wife, no old comfort. But at the same time, I also felt a strange relief. There were no memories of betrayals and scandals. Having laid out the boxes he had brought, he began to settle in. I bought myself a small refrigerator, a microwave, a couple of chairs, and a table. Things like clothes and a laptop made up his entire belongings. But inside there was a feeling, I'm starting over. Mark was not alone. He had several friends who remained on the sidelines for a long time, not knowing how to react to his family crisis. Now that the question of divorce became obvious, friends began to show support. One of them, Brian, who worked as a real estate lawyer, helped with advice on the apartment and the preparation of the lease agreement. "Dude, you made the right choice," Brian said as the two of them sat on the balcony of Mark's new apartment, drinking beer. "Life does not end with one marriage. I understand that it hurts, but believe me, you yourself will feel how much easier it will be when everything is over." "I can already feel it," Mark admitted, looking at the city lights below. "Of course, there is bitterness because I loved Emily. But there is too much deception and toxic quarrels." Another friend of his, Kevin, had known Mark since his student years. He suggested that Mark start jogging with him again in the morning to regain the habit of sports and drive away depression. So they did. Every Saturday early in the morning, they went for a run along the paths of a nearby park. Mark felt that such physical activity cleared dark thoughts from his head. "How are you?" Kevin asked, catching his breath after another lap. "Are you preparing for the final court hearing?" "Yes, everything seems clear. I have irrefutable evidence of betrayal, Mark sighed. We have already agreed on many details with her lawyer, so the trial is a pure formality. I just feel sorry that I spent so many years not noticing where everything was going. It's not your fault. People change. Sometimes everything collapses without any special prerequisites. The main thing is that you did not stay in this mud and found the strength to leave. The words of friends encouraged me and gave me confidence that life was not over. But in the depths of Mark's soul, there still lived a longing for his former ideals, for that happy marriage that seemed possible to him. Some nights he woke up from disturbing dreams in which he saw Emily calling him back or memories of their wedding. At such moments, he felt that he had not yet fully recovered from the pain. As the final court hearing approached, Mark found himself thinking that he was no longer so afraid of the word divorce. He wanted to close this page to finally be free from pain, and there was also a vague hope that there might be something better ahead. Maybe someday he would build a new relationship, but without lies and deception. Sometimes, while browsing social networks, he saw photographs of colleagues who were organizing forays into nature or attending concerts downtown. He sometimes wanted to join in to emerge from the everyday routine and return to an active social life. But he understood that he was not quite ready for fun. Everything will come in due time, he told himself. One evening, as he scrolled through his phone in his brand new living room, a text message arrived from Emily. Short, "Forgive me. I know I'm to blame. Can you help me at least a little? There's not enough money." Mark sighed bitterly. She was asking for help when she herself had driven their family into the abyss. He didn't want to answer, but he couldn't remain indifferent. "Hello," he wrote back. "I have no desire to get involved in scandals again. If you need any reasonable financial assistance, discuss this with an attorney. I have no intention of supporting your new habits." He understood that if she had spent her savings, was deep in debt, or was about to lose her house, it was her responsibility. After all, she herself chose this path. A mixture of pity and anger raged inside him, but he did not want to return to the role of savior. Thus, Mark was finally convinced that the way out of a toxic relationship is not only a legal divorce, but also an emotional distance. He began a new chapter in his life, where he gradually found peace, albeit with a touch of sadness. He still had formalities ahead of him, but his heart was already saying, "You are free." The days flew by inexorably. Emily remained at her father's house, but her alcoholism began to get out of control. She could drink in the morning, miss opportunities to find a new job, and every evening ended with new hysterics, outbursts of aggression, and complaints about fate. The parents saw that their daughter was falling into the abyss. Ellen tried to lock up the alcohol and put away the bottles, but Emily could go to the store and buy more. Harold could not stand the scandals and went into his workshop, only occasionally trying to reason with him. "Emily, you can't live like this. If this goes on, you will kill yourself." "I don't care," she answered, sipping cheap wine. "I've already lost everything: the brand, the job, the respect of people." Finally, her parents could not stand it anymore and announced an ultimatum. Either she was sent to a rehabilitation center for treatment, or they would deprive her of help and kick her out of the house. At first, Emily resisted, sending everyone to hell. But one evening, after experiencing a severe attack of nausea, a wild migraine, and looking at her reflection in the mirror, she realized that she had come to the edge. "Mom, Dad," Emily muttered, going out into the kitchen in the morning with a mug of cooled tea. I agree. I need to get out of this. Otherwise, I will die." Ellen and Harold looked at each other with relief. Although they were angry and disappointed, they still loved their daughter and wanted to bring her back to life. On the outskirts of Oklahoma City, there was a private rehabilitation center where people with alcohol addiction and depression were treated. It was not a luxurious clinic, but quite professional, with good specialists. The parents paid for the first month of Emily's stay there, hoping that she would be able to return to normal. On the way to the clinic, Emily sat in the back seat of her father's car, looking out the window. The rain drummed on the glass, the city streets flashed by as if in a gray fog. Thoughts ran through her head about how she got to this situation. She once had a loving husband, a decent job, and now she is in rehabilitation as a hopeless alcoholic. Emily, my father said quietly, breaking the silence, we will help you. But keep in mind that everything depends on your desire to improve. I know, she muttered. It's just, I thought life was over without Mark. But apparently, I need to change myself and not kill myself. Ellen sat next to her, clenching her hands into fists to keep from crying. It hurt her to see what her daughter had become, but she wanted to believe that all was not lost. Finally, they arrived at the clinic gates. The inside was clean and tidy, a simple reception area where patients were given cards and introduced to the treatment program. Emily, through a veil of internal shame, signed papers voluntarily agreeing to undergo rehabilitation. We'll have to leave you here for a month, Ellen said, trying to speak in a firm tone. Doctors and psychologists will help. Then we'll see how you feel. Okay? Emily bit her lip, feeling the tears coming again. Thank you for not leaving me. They said goodbye at the building door. When her parents left, Emily was left alone with the clinic staff. She was given a simple room with one bed, a table, and a locker. Looks like a hospital cell, she thought. But I understood that this was a chance, perhaps the last chance, to return to reality. The first few days turned out to be hell. Emily had withdrawal symptoms, often had headaches, slept poorly, and wanted to drink all the time. The nurses gave her sedatives according to a doctor's prescription. The psychologist came regularly to talk, but Emily initially refused and became angry. I don't want to tell strangers about my mistakes, she barked on the first day. I understand it's hard, the psychologist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Perkins, answered softly. But if you don't start talking about what happened to you, progress will be slow. As the days passed, Emily began to regain glimmers of awareness through a combination of therapy, anti-anxiety medications, and isolation from alcohol. One night she woke up in a cold sweat, realizing that she had seen a nightmare. In it, Mark looked at her with contempt, and Tom laughed in her face. In the morning, she called the psychologist herself. Dr. Perkins, I'm ready to talk. And she began to talk about how her jealousy of Sarah and resentment towards her husband grew into an insane affair with Tom, how she lost her job and drove herself into a dead end. The psychologist listened without judgment and took notes. Sometimes she asked what Emily wanted to achieve, why she didn't try to resolve conflicts differently. At first, Emily answered in monosyllables, but gradually the conversations turned into real purification. She cried, admitted mistakes, and saw for herself how stupid she had behaved. After a couple of weeks, Emily began to feel calmer. Alcohol withdrawal symptoms decreased noticeably, and she began to sleep better. Doctors encouraged her to take small steps toward recovery by participating in group sessions for people facing addiction. There she heard many stories, sometimes tragic. Her own seemed like a cross between a banal love triangle and a fall into a pit, but everyone who sat in the circle supported each other. I don't know how I'm going to live next, she said at one of the group therapy sessions. I don't have a job, Mark left me, and I myself don't want to return him. I ruined everything. I feel like nothing. Your life can still be built anew, the group leader assured. But this requires time and your willingness to change. Sometimes you have to go through the darkest night to see the dawn. Emily listened to these words and understood. There was truth in them. Maybe she really should pick herself up from rock bottom and start over. But for now, she couldn't believe that someday the pain would subside, and she would be able to look at herself in the mirror without contempt. The month of rehabilitation was coming to an end. Emily periodically called her mother. Ellen was restrainedly happy to hear that her daughter did not drink and was trying to normalize her psyche. Harold conveyed warm words to her several times that, "We are waiting for you at home, but only if you stay sober." Before being discharged, Emily had a final conversation with Dr. Perkins. She said that it is important to continue psychological consultations, visit support groups, otherwise the risk of failure is high. Emily understood this. She asked to extend her stay for another week, but her parents said that it was difficult for them financially. She had to agree to leave on the condition that she find a psychotherapist and go to sessions. On the last day at the clinic, while packing a suitcase with clothes and personal belongings, Emily looked out the window. The bright sun was shining there, and a warm breeze was shaking the trees. She felt something like a quiet hope inside. Even if her life was completely destroyed, there was still a chance to rebuild herself. The main thing is not to return to the bottle and not try to find new Toms to fill the void. The spring weather in Oklahoma City was capricious. It was pouring rain, then the bright sun suddenly appeared. It was on such a changeable day that the final court hearing in the divorce case of Mark and Emily took place, and the proceedings of Sarah and Tom were also ongoing. It turned out that their cases were being heard in the same court, although by different judges, but during the same period. In the waiting room, one could see the tense faces of the former spouses, each with their own lawyer. Mark sat on a bench in the corridor. In his hands was a folder with documents. His lawyer had already entered into the case all the evidence of Emily's infidelity, and all that remained was to wait for a formal decision. Mark himself did not feel the same frantic resentment, rather, some devastation and a desire to finish everything and move on. That's why Emily caused everyone serious concern. She looked very pale and thinner, but a little calmer than before. A couple of weeks passed after the rehab clinic. She was discharged, and she tried to stay away from alcohol. Guilt and fear were still visible in his eyes. She understood that there was no chance of saving the marriage. It was as if she had already come to terms with the upcoming trial, but inside there was still a spark of hope that if not to return Mark, then at least to avoid hostility. Around the corner, in another corridor, Sarah, she was also waiting her turn. She was facing the final procedure for a divorce from Tom and a decision on custody of her daughter. She checked her phone every now and then, hoping that everything would go well. Tom was wandering somewhere nearby with a lawyer and whispering nervously. He tried to show that he was confident, but his eyes sparkled with fear of loss and reputational failure. Mark and Emily's hearing began at 10 in the morning. The judge, an elderly man with a tired face, listened carefully to the parties and examined the documents. Mark's lawyer explained that the parties agreed on most property issues. The house, encumbered with a mortgage, initially remained in doubt, but in the end, the parties decided that it was put up for sale and the proceeds were divided equally. Emily had no stable income, and Mark had no desire to pay further debts for real estate, which he now associated with betrayal. Final decision: the marriage is dissolved. The judge said clearly after the formalities. Property is distributed according to the signed agreement. There are no children together, so custody is not considered. Emily lowered her head. It would seem that she understood that it was all over, but the final verdict hit her like lightning. Mark sighed. There was a heaviness in his soul, but also a strange clarity. He was officially free. Now a road opened before him, where there would be no more reproaches and quarrels. When they left the hall, Emily threw a guilty glance at Mark. "I'm sorry," she whispered almost inaudibly. "I'm sincerely sorry. There's been nothing to forgive for a long time," he said quietly, avoiding her eyes. "May everything be fine with you." He walked around her and moved towards the exit without looking back. Emily felt her heart squeezing, but gathering her will into a fist, she refrained from tears. It was time to learn to live without Mark. Almost simultaneously, in another office, a hearing was going on in the case of Sarah and Tom. Everything was a little more complicated there because of the child, and also because of controversial financial issues. But Sarah had strong trump cards. She provided the court with evidence of her husband's infidelity, and her lawyer also emphasized that Tom was constantly disappearing, did not care for his daughter, and put moral pressure on his wife. "The court takes into account the interests of the child," announced the judge, a stern woman with her hair tied up. "The mother has more stable conditions. The father did not present convincing arguments to challenge custody. Therefore, the child remains with Sarah. Tom is obliged to pay alimony, the amount of which is established." Tom winced, but realized that there was no point in fighting. He has already suffered reputationally, and now he has lost his family status. But he lacked the courage to publicly object. The judge made it clear that the divorce would be Tom's fault, and this gave Sarah almost all the advantages in financial terms. When her hearing ended, Sarah left the room feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. In the corridor, she ran into Mark. He went there to find a lawyer. Their gazes met, and Sarah realized that, like her, he was now officially free. A quiet voice sounded between them. "Is it over?" "Yes," she nodded. "And yours?" "And me." They were silent for some time, looking at each other with understanding. They both had to endure pain, withstand lies and meanness, but now they experienced, albeit bitter, the feeling, "We can move on." Several weeks have passed. One Saturday morning, Mark drove to the Martin Park Nature Center to walk on the trails and get some fresh air. Suddenly, he saw a familiar figure. Sarah walked along the same route, holding the hand of her 5-year-old daughter, a dark-haired baby with cheerful eyes. "Sarah?" "Hello," Mark froze, feeling pleasantly surprised. "What a meeting." "Oh, Mark, hello," she responded, smiling, and her daughter timidly hid behind her leg. "We decided to spend the weekend outdoors. What about you?" "Yes, I went out for a walk." Mark smiled at the girl. "Hello, baby. I'm your mom's colleague." The girl looked out a little, smiled, but continued to hold tightly to her mother's hand. Sarah introduced her. "This is Sofia Salfachka." "Sophia, this is Uncle Mark. He is very kind." The girl nodded, looking at him with curiosity. Mark's heart sank. He didn't have children, and he suddenly felt a warm wave towards this baby, who looked with big brown eyes. Having made themselves comfortable on one of the paths, they decided to walk together along the river, where beavers and waterfowl live. As Sarah and Mark walked side by side, Sophia would point excitedly at the ducks or squirrels from time to time. Mark helped the girl climb onto a small stone boulder, which she could not reach without the support of an adult. "Thank you, Uncle Mark," she said timidly as he grabbed her by the arms. "You're welcome," he replied, smiling. "Do you like to walk in the park?" "Yeah, I like to feed ducks. But Mom says it's better not to give them bread, otherwise they'll feel bad." Sarah laughed. "Yes, we read that bread for ducks is not as healthy as it seems, but we took special seeds if you want to try feeding them." They walked quite slowly. Sarah periodically told how things were going with them. It turned out that the court decided almost everything in her favor. The house remained with her and the child, and Tom paid alimony. Sarah herself tried to work even harder to provide for her daughter. Mark shared that his life is also getting better. He bought some more furniture and goes to the gym on weekends. "I'm glad you're finding balance," Sarah said, smiling sincerely. "We've both been through a lot." When Sophia was distracted by the reeds near the water, Mark and Sarah exchanged knowing glances for a second. It was neither coquetry nor flirting, but rather the quiet solidarity of two people who went through the betrayal of their loved ones. No rush, no hints of romance, just warm human communication. At the end of the walk, the girl was tired, and Sarah invited her to rest a little on a bench. Mark sat down next to her, watching the baby yawn and cuddle with her mother. A nagging feeling arose in his chest. Perhaps this was exactly the calm family happiness that he had never had. "You know," he said quietly to Sarah, "I won't rush things, but if suddenly you and Sophia want to go to the zoo or something else together, I'll be glad to join." "We'll think about it," she answered softly, a little embarrassed. But, yes, that would be great. Sophia loves animals. They exchanged phone numbers, more precisely, non-work numbers. Not because they wanted to start something immediately, but to have the opportunity to meet the child in a friendly manner and communicate outside the office. In the souls of both Mark and Sarah, a feeling began to arise that the pain from the past was slowly receding, making way for new connections. Let them be cautious, but sincere. Mark, having received the divorce certificate, experienced several strange weeks. He was either overwhelmed by a wave of memories of Emily and his past cozy home, or he felt joyful relief. From time to time, he caught himself thinking that freedom from a toxic marriage, allowed him to finally think about what he himself wanted from life. He took a couple of days off to visit his parents in another city. They had not seen him for a long time, but supported him from a distance. Mark's mother, a kind woman named Frances, accepted the news of his divorce with sadness, but said that the main thing now is that he be happy. The father, on the contrary, believed that it is better to separate than to live in deception, and patted his son on the shoulder with the words, "Son, life is long, there is still more to come." Returning to Oklahoma City, Mark felt energized. He began to meet with friends more often, went to the gym, and went out of town on weekends to fish with Kevin. At the same time, he was in no hurry to get into a new relationship. Some inner voice told him that he needed time to finally heal his mental wounds. Professionally, everything was also going surprisingly well. The marketing department, led by Mark, signed a contract with a large pharmaceutical company, and their advertising campaign was successful. The director of the company even praised him at the general meeting, noting that Mark knows how to create a favorable atmosphere in the team. Sarah continued to work under his supervision. No one in the office ever found out that their former spouses were lovers. Mark and Sarah were extremely professional, but their communication became a little warmer. Some colleagues occasionally joke, "You and Sarah have a wonderful interaction. This is probably a good sign." But no one suspected the real drama that unfolded behind the scenes. From time to time, Mark and Sarah met outside the office, but always in a friendly manner, without any hint of romance. Sarah often took her daughter with her, and Mark helped with some little things, giving them a ride or buying tickets to the Children's Museum. It was new for him to communicate with a child, to see how she grows and enjoys little things, and inside he grew sympathy for this little family. But with all this, Mark did not forget that personal freedom is now his priority. He needed to learn to live alone, so as not to rush to patch up the holes with the first woman he came across. Yes, he was beginning to feel something more than just sympathy for Sarah, but both of them reasonably understood that it was too early to rush. They had barely recovered from the pain and created a more or less stable way of life. "I value my independence," Mark shared with Kevin one evening over dinner at a pizzeria. "I don't want to be trapped in mistrust and scandals again." "And you're right," Kevin nodded, raising his glass of soda. "It's better to understand yourself first and then build something new." That's what he did. He tried to meet new people, made acquaintances at the gym, sometimes went on dates on the recommendation of friends, but without much enthusiasm. Deep inside, he felt that it was more important for him now to strengthen himself as a person. While Mark and Sarah were building a new life, Volume was experiencing serious problems. In the Oklahoma business world, rumors spread quickly and his reputation began to erode due to a divorce scandal and evidence of infidelity. Clients who valued family values or simply disdained public scandals tried not to deal with a realtor caught in such dirty adultery. In addition, some of the deals Tom was counting on fell through. One developer refused to sign a contract with him after learning that Tom had a bad reputation. After all, if a realtor is able to lie to his wife and clients, then he cannot be trusted with large sums and confidential information. This is how people in business reasoned. "Damn," Tom cursed when he received a refusal. "It's all because of your—" He almost said wife, but caught himself, because Sarah was already almost officially an ex. Because of this story, he was angry at the whole world, but in fact he had driven himself into a dead end. At the same time, he had to pay child support, and his income was rapidly falling. He was nervous, tried to find new clients in other states, sent out proposals, but so far without success. Tom's personal life was also in ruins. The women with whom he had short affairs did not linger, having learned about the divorce story and rumors of frequent infidelities. They preferred to stay away. He realized that he had no family left, no stable income, no reputation. In an attempt to drown out his inner anxiety, he began to abuse alcohol and often stayed late in bars that he and Emily knew from their early secret dates. But I still didn't find any consolation there. Drinking helped me forget for the evening, but in the morning reality hit me harder. So Tom gradually plunged into a chaotic life, changing to cheap motels and rented apartments. And if Mark, Sarah, and even Emily sought to recover, each in their own way, then Tom stubbornly walked towards the bottom. Nobody extended a helping hand to him. He burned all his bridges. As a result, his fall became another confirmation of the phrase, betrayal destroys not only the one who was betrayed, but also the traitor himself. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.